Today we have a special interview with Mr. Akashambatwa Mbikusita Lewanika. He is a Pan-African revolutionary, convener and founder of the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy, and once upon a time National Secretary of the party, former cabinet minister and MP, former special political assistant to the president, that's President Rupia Banda, former managing director of Tazara, group director of projects for Indeco, community development activist, scholar, author, and prince in the Barotse land.
And in the case of the Barotse cultural landscape, you have parts of one part of Africa where the traditional system has been least damaged, which means it should be easier to repair it. And the cultural system in terms of governance is the opposite of the European culture. This top-down business that's not our African culture. Our African governance system starts with the individual in a family, and then the family in a homestead, and the homestead in various political areas up to the apex. So even problem identification, solution proposition should follow that pattern. They should not come from the apex to the bottom. They should come from the bottom and move on according to our traditional system, which, by the way, it's not just the Barotse traditional system. I've referred to Egypt. There is a book called The Destruction of the Black Civilization, which gives a very interesting narration how the governance system of Africans, when they are not at war or under invasion, is. And you find that from the Egyptians, the Congolese empires, the Mali empires, the Monomtapa Empire, at a point when they were at peace, their governance system was not top-down, it was bottom-up. And these are some of the things that, if you want to preserve the Barotse cultural landscape, you must define culture very broadly. It includes governance. And genuine good governance is self-governance. There is no good governance when you are being governed by other people, however good they are. So genuine governance is self-governance. And that is one of the issues that needs to be brought. So you need to revive that culture. You need to re-strengthen the structures of governance, because the same structures of governance are the same structures of ensuring the proper usage of land and natural resources. So that it's this same governance system that makes sure that you don't cut fruit trees, you don't kill birds at the wrong time, and so on. So how you use it properly and how you protect it is from that structure, so that without rebuilding that structure, you are not empowering them to be able to use the resources properly and protect them. And it's that protection of the land and cultural landscape that is more important than whether or not that protection is recognized as a World Heritage Site. And if the World Heritage Site recognition brings in support for that system that is native driven, then we are going in the right direction. If the World Heritage Site Declaration is decided in a dictatorial manner, in an imposed manner, and then in a management planning system in which the natives continue to be marginalized, then you'd find that, one, of course, there will be hostility locally. Two, it will not work. Three, you might as well not even have a World Heritage, because it will be a destructive thing. But potentially, a World Heritage recognition is a good thing, but under these other conditions. It's not a good thing in and of itself, and it's not a good thing just like that. Indeed, when I was looking at this, I looked at I made inquiries over not only the Victoria, the Mosotunya Falls, but also the Mutapa in Zimbabwe, where Cecil Rhodes is buried, a heritage site. And when I inquired to the people who are working there, I asked them that we know that you've been declared into a World Heritage Site, and I have a copy of your plan. I sent them the plan, then asked them, how is it working in practice? Then I was given very candid guidance. One said the number one thing is that you must ensure that the livelihood of the people is the centerpiece of the management plan. Two, the people, the local people in the management of that plan is also critical. And so that there are many examples of World Heritage Sites. Some are good, some are bad. It's not automatic that the minute you are declared a heritage site, then all your problems have been solved. In fact, you may introduce new problems. And also how you market the heritage site also worries me. You see, if you are marketing that all tourists will be coming, so the natives will just sit in their huts and the tourists will be bringing money, that is misleading people. And that is not the proper uses of the Barossa cultural landscape, as I say, because the Barossa cultural landscape is not just for artifacts or for tourists. It's for food. It's for part of the landscape is the language, preservation of the language. Our native indigenous African languages have also to be counted out. It's the traditional governance system that needs to be also protected. It's part of our culture. So culture is actually the totality of people's livelihood, actually.
Zambia attained its independence 1964. We'll move from there to 1991. When it attained its independence, when it got its liberation, as it's commonly referred to, do you feel that was true freedom that we attained as a nation? In other words, what is your definition of freedom? Yeah. Well,
definitely it was promising. When Africans were fighting for independence, the promise was that after independence, we will solve our problems. And one of our problems was lack of freedom, lack of justice, lack of equality, economically, socially, and self-regard. So it was assumed that independence would open the door to that. Now, the difficulty that we faced is that if you go back to before independence, to before colonialism, that these countries we call Malawi, Kenya, Zambia did not exist. And contrary to those who frequently say God created Zambia, that's a lie. God did not create Zambia. Zambia was created by Cecil Rhodes for his own purposes. The indigenous African formation, the kingdoms or authorities that existed before that, are the ones that were disempowered by colonialism. Because colonialism means basically two things. To disempower people in terms of control over their land, and to disempower people in terms of self-governance. Now, the institutions that were disempowered were traditional authorities. So if that disempowerment was what colonialism is, then the logic should say that decolonization means taking back the power from those it was taken away from. So the problem number one of the independence we got was that it did not mean that power was taken back by these colonialists to those they took it from. Instead, they created their own countries on African soil, gave them a new governance system, which in many cases was totally un-African. Even trained its leaders to manage this now European contraption. And so that this European contraption called Zambia, called Kenya, called Malawi, under the leadership that got power after in the name of independence, was not committed to retaining power where the Europeans had taken it from. In fact, they took over the prejudices of European colonialists against African institutions, African culture. One of our most revolutionary freedom fighters, Samuel Machel, put it very crudely that in order for the nation to be built, the tribe must die. Now, Samuel Machel was a nationalist of this Portuguese contraption called Mozambique. So by nation building, it means in order for Mozambique to be built, in other words, in order for this contraption made by the Portuguese to be built into a nation, the tribe must die. And by tribe, it means African indigenous systems and culture. And since he was a colonial victim of the Portuguese, they had a system of governance called assimilado, that they pretended that they are not racist. It's a cultural thing. That even if, however black you were, if you could speak Portuguese and behave like Portuguese, in other words, become culturally a Portuguese, you were accepted. So in a sense, Machel took over that mission, that as long as we make Africans into black Portuguese, then we can build this nation. So that even in Zambia, it has never been stated that crudely, but if you observe how the post-independence governance has dealt with traditional authorities, it may be a little gentle, a little diplomatic, but the direction is not to build and strengthen it. At the time of independence, we had native authorities. And these native authorities had some fiscal responsibilities. They had some responsibility over justice. They had some responsibility over things like canals, bridges. They even used to give scholarship for people to go to Munali. For instance, the Mwansa Wombwe Native Authority is the one that gave a scholarship to Mr. Kashita to go to Munali and ultimately become the first engineer graduate in Zambia. Okay? But after independence, you have disempowered them completely. So you may not have been as crude as Machel, but basically your action leads to the same thing. Now, it is not just the institutions that have been killed and disempowered. Along with that goes with all the culture, and the culture includes how you look after land. You know, as Zambians are very well aware that during the colonial days, there was so much propaganda against Temen system. Like it's the most wasteful desertification agent ever invented. It's not only long after independence that we are realizing that, one, even how they described what it was not correct, because nobody was deforestating anything. And that actually it was environmentally friendly. So they made us abandon that and introduce chemical fertilizer. At first it looked like such a great success that, because at independence maize was only grown along the line of rail and in southern province, now you can grow it in Kasama. Never mind that to do that you need, where in southern province you need 1 packet of chemical fertilizer, there you need 4. But the end result looks so good. but only temporarily. Later on we discover that it has been destroying the soil, not just in the north, but even in the south and everywhere else. Then we also discover that it's not economical at all. It's not economic. There is no farm which can be really genuinely profitable on a sustainable basis based on chemical welfare. So that this neglect, lack of appreciation of traditional system also goes into our capacity to feed ourselves as a nation and to feed ourselves sustainably in an eco-friendly manner, which is regenerative and which can go on for much longer than the fertilizer is. So that is basically where the problem lies. One of the problems then is that what became independent was not African countries. What became independent was the countries created by Europeans and modeled after the European governance system, which includes the governance system I've talked about, based on dictating from top to bottom. Sometimes even just like they gave a bad name to Chitemene, they also have given a bad name to African governance. They talk as if the African traditional governance system is dictatorial. What is dictatorial is this European system we have adopted. Because any traditional leader in an African setup is controlled by his indunas. He cannot make a decision. The way the president of Zambia can wake up to say, with effect from midnight tonight, we are now a humanist country or we are now a Christian country. A traditional system is not led like that. By the time such a declaration is made, the matter would have been discussed and chewed from the bottom up. And what happens, the announcement at the top is merely the announcement of a consensus having been reached. So that again is one of the shortfall of independence. Apart from the governance system, we also adopted the economic system. Now, the economic system of Northern Rhodesia, for instance, is based, since the 1930s, was based on copper. Now, Africans used to produce copper, but for bracelets and a little bit for money exchange purposes, you didn't need an open pit mine to get copper for bracelets. So the open pit mines and all these big holes they have, which you don't see, which are underground, were created to produce copper not for African usage, but for the usage of the electricity industry in West, for the motor industry. In other words, not for us. This is why we used to say in the 70s that, you see, Africa produces what it doesn't consume and consumes what it doesn't produce. So, but what is worse is that apart from that, this economy is based on producing not to answer our needs directly, but to answer other people's needs. Is that even the machinery required makes you dependent. So you are dependent on the market, you are dependent on machinery, you are dependent on skilled manpower for it. And what is required of the African is just a small number of us to do the most unskilled jobs. It was even a struggle to get Africans to a position of being chief clerk. The more youthful, the stronger characters, the more adventurous people who were taken away from the traditional economy. So the best labor, just like they had taken slaves from Africa to go and labor in America and build America, they also took laborers from our villages to go and produce products for European consumption within Africa. Meanwhile, they undermined the traditional system. As I said, it was the African traditional economy, like governance, is a very complex one. It requires, like I'm saying, You need the plain and the forest. You need different people to play different roles. Even at household level, there are certain jobs which are more suitable for males than females. And to feed the whole family, you needed the labor of males, female, even younger youth, and so on at certain stages. Now, if you take away a man, then you take him to Kitwe. After a while, he used to go there for 5 years, come back. After a while, he now comes and takes his wife and his children. Then the villages become depopulated and disempowered to feed themselves. So that the economy we inherited was one dependent, then disarticulated in the sense that its needs from the rest of the economy was minimal, apart from cheap labor. Thirdly, it is underdeveloping to the rural economy. Now, after independence, this problem, this state of affairs, this type of economy was not changed. We continued with it. So that apart from the fact that the promise of independence was to address the problems caused by colonialism, after independence we actually continued the system of governance and the system of economic management that perpetuated the same faults that were made there. Now, during the colonial days, they knew that they only required a few of us for labor. So they came up with a pass system. And to get a pass was almost as difficult as getting a passport, a visa to go to America. You know, you have to prove that you have a job, you have to prove you feed themselves, and all sorts of things. Huh? So that's what it was to leave a village to come to an urban area. Now what that meant is that that tended to block a lot of us to remain in the village. After independence, we took away that blockage to say now we are free, you can come and live in Mrs. Whether you have a job or not, it doesn't matter. Whether you're going to be a thief or harass people at markets, it's okay, come, this is freedom. In other words, some of the process of undermining traditional economic system were accelerated after independence. Unfortunately, in the name of freedom. And we cheered that, oh no, the past white man did was racist, so now we've achieved a non-racial society, now a native can go anywhere, and even if he's not employed. So we have not addressed that. How do we reinforce, how do we repair, heal the damage of colonialism? Rather than make it worse, how do we repair? And that, I think, is the economic challenge now. You see, and it is not assisted, because sometimes we think there is development because there is ShopRite in Mungu. Where for a native to sell his cabbage to that ShopRite, you have to almost pray and beg them. Then they may allow, then they'll be so particular. If it has a little black stop, don't bring it. And sometimes what I've found in Mungu at the ShopRite is the same vegetables produced locally. If they are handed over to ShopRite by a white person, they are accepted. And this is a shameful fact. This is a shameful fact. Or for you to supply them, they want you to have a company which is registered with PACRA, which costs you money, which is registered with ZRA. Now, our villagers, we've already been impoverishing them for 80 years. Now you require that for you to sell cabbages, form a cooperative, go and register, pay money, go and have your name. If you say Mubita, say no, Mubita, that size is already taken, try another name. Then PACRA will give you another name, then you pay them. Then they say, ah, no, we can't finish this certificate until you've gone to ZRI. Then ZRI will be requiring you, sometimes they even demand, not annual, but monthly returns. Now, when it comes to foreign investors, we are paying attention to how to reduce the costs of investment. When it comes to our own villagers, we are busy increasing the cost of doing business by requiring registration, requiring fees, requiring tax. They're already paying tax because anything you buy, there's some tax for. So people who have no real income except what they can produce are handicapped. So those are some of the challenges that, unfortunately, I don't see them being visited. We seem to be so comfortable with the post-colonial dispensation that as long as we have election every 4 years, whether you bribe your way to be president or bribe your way to be MP, that's all right. As long as you have election, that's democracy. That as long as, if I set up a hotel in Mungu, then you call that development. But it's my personal hotel. My villagers are as poor as they ever were. So we are not addressing that problem. And again, the challenge is to look at our own African systems. How they think that the base of anything, whether it's governance, whether it's economic management, is the individual and the family in a home state. What do they need to increase their production themselves? How do you facilitate that? So that if there is value additions, you assist them in that way. And also, how do they do it